Okay.
You guys selling truck?
We are. We are, yeah, we're independent. We're doing a documentary following the entire mayoral race. We've been filming since last year. Yeah. Mayor race just happened, so we gotta come out and find our new events that's coming around.
Wow, that's a long jump.
We're gonna do an interview real quick, man. During meeting. Thank you so much. What do you got? Who are you shooting for? Oh, damn. Alright, I gotta go.
No. I saw you like right in the. Oh, thank you so much. I saw you in the middle, just like right there in the mix of everything. That was really good.
Yeah. Have you done any infill edits? Where'd you get the brief for this event? How fast is it moving?
They're coming back this year, right?
I believe so, yeah. They're doing a full circle. I think the route was very much last minute planned. That this thing was not a clearly organized event. It was all impromptu for what I heard. Yeah. Be right here.
I'm very weary of boats.
My name is Revision. Side is Revision Documents. Yeah, we do cultural and global politics, public ones, that's another one. So, like Michael mentioned, make a cultural documentary about the mayoral race, capture all the movements of town, as much as we can in relation to what's happening.
They're gonna come back around, right?
They're coming. I see them. I have a queue up there. See the guys where they come.
Oh, that's smart. Hey, you don't have a card, do you, sir? It's all good.
You go. All right. You have one?
It's great meeting you, man.
Same here, man.
You have a great one.
You too.
No, man, I just love to. You're with AP, huh? That's awesome, man. You're out of Houston?
Yeah.
Nice.
And you?
Local.
Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
Are you gonna come on Saturday?
No. There's a big one this year.
Uh-huh, gotcha.
That's Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you, sir.
And my email is L on my last name.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll shoot you an email.
Yep.
My name's Danny Mendez, by the way.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Documentary filmmaker.
Oh, okay. Ah, man. And you walk alone as well?
I do.
Awesome family.
I love this thing, man. I absolutely love it.
It's a
70. And they came out with a new one called the 80, but I actually like the sensor in this guy better.
Can I ask you to just like look at me down with the knee? Raise your right hand to what? The Constitution of the United States, not fucking Donald Trump.
I'm just stressed out.
NCO's here at the straight. Have a great time. You should be the ones in the front, taking a knee, being with your country.
You can talk to people that
All day.
anybody spends all day is just go around. Yes, he's right.
Missile attack from Iran was last October when hundreds of ballistic missiles were fired at this country. And this was an important moment because it showed some of the weaknesses in Israel's air defense. We have to step back and look at this from a 30,000-foot view. And the reality is that while Israel has the ability to shoot down incoming missiles, this is not a perfect system. There are many fail-safes, including those American missile defense systems that are currently deployed on the ground here in Israel. But as we saw last October, some of these missiles will slip past, and the targets then were only focused on military targets in Israel. So we saw the videos of these missiles slamming into different areas of Israel, but they were targeting military installations. Tonight, given the fact that we have confirmed Israel is now targeting Iranian nuclear facilities and long-range missile programs, anything is on the table. And that's part of the reason that Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, has declared this state of emergency. Oftentimes when these attacks take place, and I want to just give you a sense of what it's like on the ground here, taking you back to April of 2024 when we were standing outside amid this incoming missile attack, the Iranians sent drones and cruise missiles to try and distract Israeli air defense systems, and then they followed with these ballistic missiles that took around 12 minutes to get here. And that was to try to basically weaken the air defense mechanism that protects this country and the civilian population here. Something similar could happen tonight, and it's part of the reason that we just got that special alert sent out to the entire country to stay near to bomb shelters. Remember, Israel has been at war for more than 615 days. Following the October 7th massacre that was conducted by Hamas infiltrating into southern Israel from the Gaza Strip, Israel has been at a state of war. But this is a country that is used to missile attacks. They're used to drone attacks. They're used to rocket fire that we have seen not only from the Gaza Strip and from, of course, Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, but the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen that consistently are firing missiles at this country. So actually, when that siren was sounding earlier, my first thought was this could be a missile attack from Yemen. But it was an alert to tell the population to get up and to read the emergency declaration that was sent out by Israel's defense minister. But to catch our viewers up, Jesse, again, the latest information that we have tonight, Israel is striking Iranian nuclear facilities and long-range missile programs, according to the IDF. Explosions were heard in the Iranian capital of Tehran, and Israel, as we speak, is bracing for the possibility of incoming drone and missile fire from Iranian territory. Jesse?
All right, Trey, thank you so much. We'll be back to you momentarily. Now let's bring in senior national correspondent Kevin Cork. Kevin, you know, we are not participating in these preemptive strikes, but you have to imagine we gave the green light.
I think it's a fair assessment, Jesse. And you know what? I just can tell you this. There are those inside the Beltway, frankly, who have been sort of predicting that this was a very likely circumstance. You heard Trey mention the fact that Israel has been at war for going on 2 years now, and yet throughout this entire uprising in that part of the world, they've always had to keep an eye on what's been happening in Tehran because they have made it their collective policy to end Israel as we know it. And so when you have a circumstance like that, you have a change in leadership here in the U.S., and there was a feeling, if you don't mind me saying, that this administration, frankly, doesn't want to be engaged in worldwide excursions into other wars. There was a feeling among some here in Washington that, you know what, if something does happen, we very well may have to get back involved, and then this certainly might be that circumstance. I can also tell you this, at least from a defense perspective, and I'm going to see if deepest now over at the Pentagon. Do this, Jesse. Whenever you know that this is a possibility, the administration has to have signed off on this. At some point, there had to have been a conversation with the SecDef, Secretary of Defense, and very probably even the president himself. And so that is wild speculation, clearly, because I've not spoken to either gentleman. But I will tell you this. That's typically how these things happen. I'm going to make a couple calls, and I'm obviously sending some notes as I'm sitting here, trying to get more granular information about what exactly was known at the White House and when they knew it. But no doubt about this. They are
you
certainly
have to think
on the
they
phone
knew a
with
little while
leadership in
ago
Israel.
because we were moving missile defense systems from Ukraine into the region. And, you know, nothing happens there without our signing off.
No question
you know,
about that.
They're a state that we sponsor, we fund. They're our biggest ally in the region. And this kind of ends after the deadline that Trump had set on these Iranian nuclear negotiations. Today was the day. Today was the deadline. And I guess that the fact that there's preemptive strikes now in the Capitol tells you everything you need to know about how those negotiations had gone.
Well, you know, and Bibi Netanyahu, frankly, has been sort of painted in a corner. He's got to protect his people. And so the argument from them would be simply, we have done what we could. You have done what you can. We can't wait. The danger is too great for our country. And that very well may be what has led us to this hour, Jesse.
Yeah, so the worst case scenario, though, is, you know, you go in, you don't get everything, and they retaliate, and they hit some of our bases in Baghdad. They hit some of our ships in the sea, and then it escalates. That's the scariest part. And hopefully it can stay contained, and it's surgical, and it's complete. But you never know with these things, and it could spiral totally out of control. Kevin Corke, thank you so much. Let's bring in our chief national security correspondent, Jennifer Griffin. Jennifer, what are you hearing?
Well, Jesse, we are hearing that the president has called a national security meeting of his cabinet secretaries at the White House. It is clear that the White House did have some inkling that this was coming. We knew earlier today when General Eric Kurilla, the CENTCOM commander, just last night, he called off today's testimony on Capitol Hill, and there appeared to be an increasing sense that Israel could take matters into its own hands. We are told by senior U.S. officials that the U.S. military is not involved in these strikes tonight. We're starting to get some of reports of what the targets were inside Tehran, and it appears as if there were at least a dozen, possibly more, sites affiliated with Iran's nuclear program that the Israeli military targeted. We saw the explosions on Twitter. You can see some of the videos from Tehran, but the Israelis have also said that this is just the beginning. This is not a one and done. This was not a symbolic strike. This was a strike to take out Iran's nuclear program. Again, here at the Pentagon, the U.S. military is not involved, but we did hear earlier today from the head of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, and he allegedly had told Prime Minister Netanyahu that the IDF, the Israeli military, should not carry out such a strike against Iran without consulting with or coordinating with the United States. And that is for a very simple reason, that the U.S. has 40,000 troops in the region at bases within striking distance from Iran. Iran has a very significant ballistic missile program, as we know. We saw last October what they were capable of in terms of striking Israel. But remember, the U.S. Has long felt that they were sitting ducks at these bases, whether it's in the UAE, Qatar, or Bahrain, or across the region. And of course, Iraq is also, we have troops in Iraq right now. It's the reason that also yesterday that Defense Secretary Hegseth authorized that military dependents, spouses, and family members could leave the region voluntarily. There were not planes sent by the U.S. military to evacuate those personnel And the U.S. military themselves, the soldiers and airmen and others, are not planning to leave the region. Let's talk about what the U.S. does have set up in the region. We know that the USS Carl Vinson, the aircraft carrier strike group, is in the Arabian Sea. We know that B-52s had been sent late last year, to Diego Garcia. And so there is quite a bit of firepower that the U.S. has. But there is some concern here at the Pentagon from people that I've spoken to in recent weeks, suggesting that the strikes against the Houthis, the over a month of strikes, not just airstrikes, but also from the sea, Tomahawk missiles and others, and especially F-18s, that a lot of those munitions were used and expended in that Houthi military operation. So there is some issue of how well positioned the U.S. military is right now. We certainly have enough bases and troops across the region, but this is a very serious situation and is likely to expand because the Iranians have said that they will retaliate and that they will hold the U.S. responsible.
Jennifer, how confident are U.S. military officials in the ability of the Israeli Air Force to clear all of these targets out effectively and efficiently?
Well, remember, the conventional wisdom for some time, Jesse, has been that the Israeli military could not eliminate Iran's nuclear program alone, in the sense that they don't have the bunker buster bombs that the U.S. military has to reach some of the deepened sites. I mean, you have almost a dozen overt sites that the Iranians, that the U.S. and Israel know about. Then there are also the covert sites and the very, very deeply dug underground and into the mountains centrifuge sites, as well as, there are things that the U.S. military and Israel thinks they know, and then there are things that they may not know in terms of where Israel's nuclear program is hidden. It's been hidden for some time. So while this is a very significant strike, and remember, the last time that Israel hit, they took out most of Iran's air defense systems. So it is much easier for Israel to strike than it was, say, 6 months ago.
Okay, and so what is the concern if, say, they get 90% of the targets eliminated, and then the Iranians just ramp up the nuclear program as fast as possible in order to acquire a nuclear weapon to have at that point? How long do we think it would take for Iran to do that?
Well, the assessment by Israel and others within the national security establishment here in the United States is that Iran had enough fissile material to be days away from creating, if a simple bomb, if you will, maybe not a sophisticated weapon, but they certainly have enough, and they can cross that threshold very, very quickly and very easily.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty scary. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Let's go back to Trey Yingst. He's in Jerusalem. What's new, Trey?
Jesse, a lot of developments for you. We are hearing tonight from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who confirmed these strikes took place with dozens of Israeli jets in the skies over Iran. The Prime Minister saying that the Natanz nuclear facility, this is the main enrichment site for Iran's nuclear program, was targeted in these strikes, along with a number of other locations. As we look forward here, there are a number of things to talk about, but again, Israel tonight is bracing for the possibility that there is a direct response in the coming hours from the Iranian regime. Iran's top IRGC officials had promised that if their nuclear facilities were attacked, that they would target Israel directly with a variety of missiles that they did not use in previous strikes against Israel. Remember, last April, Jesse, was the first time that Iran ever directly attacked Israel. But the timeline here is very important. On April 1st of 2024, a top IRGC commander was killed in an Israeli strike in Damascus, Syria. It took the Iranians 12 days to respond to that strike that took place. Now, whenever the Iranians targeted Israel again in October of 2024, the response window was even shorter. Israeli officials are concerned tonight that the response window to this strike that is targeting the nuclear facilities in Iran will be even shorter than those previous attacks. And so again, as we look forward here, Israel has declared a state of emergency. Special instructions have been texted to every person in this country to stay close to bomb shelters. And the country's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is releasing his first statement tonight. And I'll read you just a little bit more of what the Prime Minister said. He said moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. He confirms that not only were nuclear sites targeted in Iran, but also some of the long-range missile capabilities belonging to the Iranian regime. We have been talking with officials across the region over the past several weeks as the ongoing negotiations were taking place. This was largely considered an outlier in what could take place, again, with the scheduled 6 rounds of talks supposed to happen on Sunday. Jesse?
All right, thanks, Trey. Let's bring in IDF spokesperson Major Doron Spielman. What prompted these preemptive strikes?
Look, Iran has been saying for years that they're going to be striking Israel with nuclear weapons as soon as they can enrich uranium. They have a countdown clock that literally counts down to Israel's destruction. And we know that they've been trying to enrich fissile material for years. Based on Israeli intelligence reports, we are very close to the point of no return and to the point at which we won't even have intelligence how far their program is sitting unless we hit right now. And on that basis, Israel started this morning the Rising Lion, essentially preemptive attack on Iran to eliminate this nuclear threat. We believe that they mean to carry it out as soon as they have this material.
You've been saying that the Iranians are very close to acquiring a nuclear weapon for years. Was there something specific, a specific piece of intelligence that you received that said, this is it?
Yes, of course. We've been studying this. Israeli intelligence has been focused on this for years, and the assumption is that Iran is incredibly close to having 15 nuclear warheads. We know that they have the ballistic missiles. We have to remember, Iran, after October 7th, they threatened to strike Israel. They have ballistic missiles that also, even without a nuclear warhead, pose an existential threat to Israel. They said they were going to use them, and as we know, twice they shot a barrage of ballistic missiles. Can we imagine more than 1,000 ballistic missiles rained down on Israel? If it wasn't for our missile defense capabilities, this country would have already been destroyed. Imagining equipping any one of them with a nuclear warhead. Again, the Jewish people, we have a long history. We know when an enemy tells you they're going to destroy you, if you don't believe them, we don't want to have another Holocaust in our hands. And that is why, now that we have the ability, we carried out this preemptive strike.
So jets launched from Israel, I guess, hours ago, and we're hearing that there's going to be several waves. What should we expect in the coming days here?
I think that this is the opening scene. I think that we are speaking right now. Remember, just half an hour ago, everyone in Israel was woken up. My entire family, every single person in Israel, half an hour ago was sent into shelters and then received an alert. The reason you're in shelters now is not because there's an incoming missile yet, but is because we've launched a preemptive strike on Iran. We should expect incoming missile threats. So I think that we're at the opening scene of something that's going to take many hours. These are waves and waves of Israeli planes, according to the Prime Minister. And we have to realize Iran is quite far away. It is almost like New York trying to hit Los Angeles. We're talking thousands of kilometers away. This is not directly on Israel's border. Planes have to fly there. They have to refuel.
Yeah, we're seeing right now the first images of these strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities, the main one, and their long-range missile programs. We just pray for peace in the Middle East, and God bless all of the American soldiers in the region.
And welcome to Hannity. Tonight we begin with this Fox News alert. The Islamic Republic of Iran is rocked tonight by explosions during what is a major preemptive air campaign by Israeli forces. This comes as the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism is only weeks away, we are told, from weapons-grade enrichment, which means they would have the ability to build a nuclear bomb. In other words, they are about a month away, according to reports and experts and even the IAEA, all while massively expanding their stockpiling of ballistic missiles. Now, coming up, we're going to break all of this down, which is a very real threat, along with the growing hostility that is out of Iran. Also tonight, we'll spell out to the mullahs exactly what this will mean for them. First, we'll get a report from Israel, where a retaliation from Iran, that also can be imminent. The people of Israel have been warned, and they are awaiting instructions from the government as we speak. Trey Yanks has the very latest. Trey.
Yeah, Sean, good evening. Fox News can confirm that Israel launched strikes tonight against Iranian nuclear facilities and long-range missile programs. Following those strikes that took place around 3 a.m. Israel time, an emergency alert was sent out to people across this country. Special instructions from the Home Front Command telling people to stay close to bomb shelters as Israel is bracing for possible Iranian retaliation. As for the targets that were hit, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking tonight, making his first statement since these strikes took place, saying that there will be a country preparing for the possibility of any counterattack from Iran, but also talking about some of the targets that were hit. He confirms that the nuclear facilities in Iran were hit for Israel's survival, he says, going on to talk about some of the concerns about Iran's nuclear program and the enrichment of uranium. Importantly, though, he talks about the Natanz nuclear facility. This is a centrally located nuclear site that the Iranians have used to enrich uranium, oftentimes close to weapons-grade material. Remember, the Iran nuclear deal that President Trump pulled out of during his first term had Iran enriching uranium up to 3.67%. We know that Iran has, in part, gone up to 60%, getting closer and closer to weapons-grade material. And that's part of the reason that the Israelis felt that they needed to act tonight, with the ongoing nuclear talks stalled between the Americans and the Iranians. I do want to just read you this other update that we are getting from the IDF that says dozens of Israeli fighter jets took part in the strikes targeting multiple positions across Iran this evening. And we're also learning that Iran's international airport in Tehran has suspended all flights. We first learned that something could be taking place in the region around 2:16 a.m. local time, Sean, when U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee talked about being at the embassy all night and praying for the peace of Jerusalem. As we look forward here, the major concern for the Israeli people is the possible Iranian retaliation. We were here on the ground in Israel last year 2 separate times when the Iranians launched ballistic missiles into this country, first in April and then in October. During that time, we saw some of Israel's advanced missile defense systems, such as David's Sling and the Arrow system, work to shoot down some of that incoming fire. But it's not a perfect system, and that's part of the reason that the American systems, both the THAAD system and the Patriot missile defense system, have been deployed here to Israel to prepare for the possibility of Iranian missiles raining down on major population centers here. So again, Sean, the latest information that we have, we can confirm that Israel has launched an extensive strike against Iran, targeting the country's nuclear facilities and also long-range missile programs. And Israel has since declared a state of emergency across this country, bracing for the possibility of an Iranian response. And just one final update for you, Israel's national air carrier El Al has suspended flights to and from Israel. Israel's been at war for more than 600 days, Sean, and they very rarely are suspending flights. This is an indication that the airspace around this country will remain closed, and Israel is bracing for what likely will be days of exchanges of fire ahead. Sean?
All right, Trey, thank you. Military officials, Israel now striking and multiple targets, dozens of sites all across Iran. Israeli officials have said they have had enough in terms of the fusion material, that Iran may have as much to make 15 nuclear bombs within days. This coincides with multiple reports that they had gotten a 60% enrichment. All reports, every expert we have spoken to has told us that the number of weeks needed to get to nuclear grade, weapons grade material is less than a month. Anyway, here to weigh in on all this, former Secretary of State, Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo. Mike, this is a fight for Israel's survival. This is it for them. They have done everything possible to destroy the state. They have funded terror. They helped plan and orchestrate the October 7th attacks. That was the equivalent of 40,000 dead Americans a day if you extrapolate out population size. That's murder, that's rape, that's kidnapping, that's torture, that's beheading. Then they're getting hit in the other direction, again, funded by Iran and all of the terror support by Iran, #1 state sponsor of terror. That's Hezbollah in the north out of Lebanon. They've also been funding the Houthi rebels and providing the weaponry for them. And twice now they have fired directly into Israel. Now that they get close to a nuclear weapon, I don't see that Israel had any choice here tonight but to go at those nuclear facilities. Your thoughts?
Yes, Sean, I agree. They had little option. The time was running out. A nuclear conflict in the region would have been devastating, not only for the Israelis, but for American interests, for the Gulf Arab states as well. The last few days, there's been this reporting that they might do this. I'm sure the Iranians were preparing, and so I think the Israelis said, it's go time. We must do this to protect the sovereign nation of Israel. It's a righteous strike that they have taken. It's going to take them days to actually accomplish the mission of deterring this program and setting this program back by years. I'm confident that they can do that. And all nations who have been attacked by Iran, including the Americans, we've had hundreds of Americans killed by the Iranians over the last years, has an obligation to get this right and provide whatever assistance Israel needs so that it can conduct the attacks to complete this mission and put their nuclear weapons program back decades, if not forever.
Mr. Secretary, conventional wisdom has always said that they needed our bunker buster bombs to accomplish this mission. Otherwise, their only option to accomplish it would have been a tactical nuke. Do you know if the United States at any point provided any of these bunker busters to Israel? Because these facilities, nuclear facilities in Iran, are buried so deep inside the ground?
Shauna, I don't know the answer to that. I do know that President Trump has been preparing for this, right? We've seen all the weapon systems that he has moved into the region, not only defensive weapon systems in terms of what you were talking about earlier to protect from missiles, but we've moved B-52s closer. The United States has been preparing to help not only the Israelis, but our Gulf Arab state allies as well. The Israelis have the capability over a time to actually accomplish the depth that they need. I think they can pull it off. It'll require a lot of work and a lot of sustained effort, and it'll require some at least indirect assistance from the United States of America as well.
Yeah, let me ask you, there was a report on Axios today about the possibility, and there's been chatter all day that this was a possibility today or tomorrow or in the days to come. But one of the problems has been, according to estimates and sources I've had, and they reported it in Axios, that Iran has 2,000 or 3,000 missiles with warheads that can carry 2,000 pounds of explosives. On Wednesday, their Minister of Defense in Iran claiming they have a new ballistic missile with a 4,000-pound warhead, and they were building at least 50 to 100 more a month. Now, I interpret that to be Plan B. In other words, it should not be a surprise to the Iranians that the Israelis are going after their nuclear sites, but it sounds like they've been building up these long-range ballistic missiles to overwhelm the Iron Dome and destroy Israel that way. In other words, I'd call that Plan B on their part. How would you interpret it?
No doubt. That's exactly what it is, Sean. I think that was further reason the Israelis thought this was the moment we've got to do this. Do this for themselves. If they accomplish their mission, it'll be an enormous good for humankind as well. We shouldn't forget that the Iranians lost the largest ballistic missile attack in an awfully long time against Israel back last year. They've killed hundreds of Americans. There's lots of work to be done in the days ahead, and I'm confident the Israelis are prepared to defend their own nation. And we shouldn't forget this too, Sean. Those capabilities are real. What you just described in terms of the Iranian missile system is very real and very threatening. But when determined, the United States has demonstrated that the Iranians won't respond with an overwhelming response. They said when we moved the embassy to Jerusalem, there'd be a World War III. They said if we took a strike on Qasem Soleimani, there'll be World War III. In neither case was there. The Iranians gave very weak, very ineffectual responses. And we shouldn't forget, the Iranians are still trying to kill American officials. We have a real interest in Israel being successful in the coming days.
Yeah, well, we're watching very closely. Israeli officials say that they've had enough time, and there's been a lot of patience. You've got to give President Trump a lot of credit. You got to give Steve Witkoff a lot of credit. You got to give Secretary of State Marco Rubio a lot of credit, because all three of them have been very, very clear in their messaging. They don't want this. They did not want this day to occur. By every report that I have read, it was President Trump, it was Steve Witkoff, it was Marco Rubio urging patience, hoping that they would choose peace over what now is the ultimate decision that, frankly, the world was going to have to come to grips with at some point anyway. So I give the president a lot of credit for trying the peace option. This really is on the Iranians. They have made this choice. You have to believe that the #1 state sponsor of terror that says they want to wipe Israel and the U.S. off the map, when they say it, I think you got to believe it. And I think that's why we find ourselves in this position tonight. Mike Pompeo, great to see you. We appreciate it.
President Trump was very patient.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, they really were. You're right. Anyway, Mr. Secretary, thank you. Following the strikes, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he put out a statement. It read, quote, "Tonight, Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in the strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Israel advised us that they believe this action was necessary for their self-defense. President Trump, the administration, they have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Let me be clear. Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel." Here now with reaction, Texas Senator Ted Cruz is with us. It seemed inevitable to me, Senator. You know more than I do, but my sources were very clear. The enrichment level was too great. The breakout time was less than a month. They would have the 15 nuclear weapons. The Israelis are not lying about it. And I have to believe those people that believe in a caliphate, convert or die, and threaten to wipe Israel and the U.S. off the map, based on also being the #1 state sponsor of terror. If they got the weapon, they'd use it. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. You're absolutely right. I believe this was inevitable, and it was rendered more inevitable today by decisions of the Ayatollah in Iran. Listen, President Trump has been clear for a long time that his red line is that Iran must completely dismantle their nuclear capacity, must disassemble their nuclear centrifuges where they are enriching uranium. And President Trump made clear they could either do so peacefully through diplomacy, or those centrifuges would be dismantled kinetically through military conflict. We're seeing the latter tonight. And this morning, Iran publicly stated no, they would not dismantle their centrifuges, and in fact, they said they would build more, they would enrich more. The Ayatollah made the decision, we are going to plunge headfirst towards getting a nuclear weapon, and basically, Iran gave the middle finger to President Trump, and Iran told Israel, you better strike us now, because if you don't do it soon, we will have a nuclear weapon. And when we have a nuclear weapon, this is a theocratic zealot who chants death to America and death to Israel. And they are building a nuclear weapon because they intend to be able to detonate a nuclear weapon in the skies of Tel Aviv or New York or Los Angeles. And so Israel is acting to defend themselves. And Sean, tonight, we should
Senator,
stand unequivocally with the state of Israel.
Senator, if I may interrupt you and then pick up your thought, Israeli news is reporting that Iran's military chief of staff has been taken out. Now, we can't confirm that, but Israeli news is reporting that at this hour.
Look, Israel has an incredibly formidable military. They are surrounded by nations that would drive them into the sea and exterminate them. Iran's objective, the Ayatollah tells you what he wants to do when he leads mobs in chanting death to Israel and death to America. He means it. The head of Iran's nuclear program, who has since gone to meet his maker, many say at the hands of the Mossad, he had written into his last will and testament that he wanted written on his tombstone, here lies a man who seeks to annihilate Israel. That's the level of hate. And I will say tonight, I want to say to every one of your viewers, please, if you're a person of faith, pray for Israel, pray for Jerusalem tonight. And let me say also, pray for U.S. servicemen and women in the Middle East, in harm's way. And I want to give a message to the Ayatollah right now. If you strike at America, if you attack our military bases, if you kill one single American serviceman or woman, I have every confidence that President Trump will respond with overwhelming force. That's a message the Ayatollah needs to understand right now, tonight. Do not attack our American military men and women.
If they are that foolish, they will pay the price. They are messing with the wrong guy. That much I can tell you. Prime Minister Netanyahu just spoke for about a minute. Let's get his comments. Let's get your reaction on the other side. Let's play it.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons. In recent years, Iran has produced enough highly enriched uranium for 9 atom bombs. 9. In recent months, Iran has taken steps that it has never taken before, steps to weaponize this enriched uranium. And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year. This is a clear and present danger to Israel's very survival.
You know, it's also Israel in many ways, I think you can argue, Senator, is doing the world a favor. And if you go back to the 80s and they took out the Iraqi nuclear sites, it almost went undetected. You might recall that the Syrian nuclear program was in play and they were able to fly under the radar, take out those sites. Very few people even noticed or paid attention. And I know there's been a lot of back and forth because this is Iran and what Iran is going to do. There's one thing that I would argue. This is happening because our former president, that would be Joe Biden, he literally turned a blind eye towards the sanctions that were bankrupting this country. And by doing so, he literally has enriched the country of Iran. He's given them money to foment terror, given them money to build out their nuclear facilities even further. And that leads us to this moment where we are today. Now, if they ever got a nuclear weapon, I would argue it's Joe Biden's fault, but I still would argue, too, that it can't happen on Donald Trump's watch either, and he has said as much himself. Last word.
Yeah, look, Sean, you're absolutely right, and it's even worse than that. Joe Biden didn't just turn a blind eye. He refused to enforce the sanctions against Iran, and he flowed over $100 billion to the Ayatollah. He made them rich in cash. And understand, Iran provides 90% of the funding for Hamas and 90% of the funding for Hezbollah. In a very real sense, Joe Biden and the Democrats funded the October 7th massacre. The death squads that murdered over 1,200 Israelis on October 7th were paid for by the money Joe Biden allowed to go to the Ayatollah. And I will say the threat here tonight, Iran, they intend to do everything they can. You know, it was interesting listening to you interview Mike Pompeo. Mike is a friend of mine. He mentioned Iran is trying to murder former U.S. senior officials. What he had the humility not to say is he is number one on that list. The Ayatollah is trying to murder Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State. They're trying to murder John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor. Joe Biden was spending $2 million a month in security to protect them from Ayatollah's murderous efforts. And by the way, let us not forget, Iran is trying to murder Donald J. Trump, and Israel is doing a favor to America right now by taking out Iran's nuclear capacity. We don't know how this is going to end up, but a nuclear Iran would be a profound threat to Israel and a profound threat to America. And so my prayers tonight are to every Israeli and every American in harm's way tonight, that God will keep them safe and that we will stand strong to prevent a nuclear Iran that could commit vast acts of mass murder.
Senator, I share that prayer with you. Our prayers are with all the people that are living through this tonight. Thank you for being with us. We go back to Trey Yanks. He's in Israel. Trey, what's the latest?
Yeah, Sean, we've learned that the IDF is now mobilizing thousands of reservists preparing for the possibility of an Iranian response. And it's really not a question of if Iran responds, but rather when and how. Officials have been talking to local media here, discussing some of the targets that were hit in these strikes tonight. Again, the IDF told us earlier that dozens of Israeli fighter jets took part in these strikes against Iranian territory. And not only were the nuclear sites hit, but also some of the long-range missile capabilities. And according to initial reports in Iranian media that we're getting in, there are a number of casualties on the ground. I want to be very careful about who was killed in our reporting because we can't independently confirm this yet. But if some of this information is ultimately confirmed, it adds to an already long target list for the Israelis, not only looking to send a message anymore to the Iranian regime, as they did when they struck Iranian territory last year, but now actually to try and start to dismantle the country's nuclear program. That is exactly what we are seeing tonight. And you talked about it with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Senator Ted Cruz. This is a country who was getting very, very close to building a nuclear bomb. And that is why, according to officials that we have talked to over the past 2 years, the Israelis say they decided to strike tonight. This was largely considered an outlier option in what was going to take place. We know that there was a 6th round of talks scheduled to happen between the Americans, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and his Iranian counterparts on Sunday in Oman. We've not gotten any update about those conversations, but of course these strikes tonight change the entire situation across the Middle East. As for the latest developments on the ground, Israel has declared a state of emergency across this country. And Sean, I want to take you through how we learned that this was taking place. A siren sounded across Israel just around 3 a.m., followed by a text alert that went out to everyone across this country, warning people to listen to the instructions by Israel's Home Front Command. This is the branch of the army responsible for communicating with Israeli civilians. It was clear at that moment that something was happening, because when a siren sounds across Israel and there's no incoming rocket or missile, it's used as an opportunity for the Israeli military and government to get the attention of the Israeli people. And that's exactly what it was used for tonight. Remember, Israel has been at war since October 7th, more than 615 days. And they've been fighting a war on 7 fronts. They not only were receiving rocket fire from Gaza, but also the rocket and missile fire from Lebanon with Iranian proxy Hezbollah there. And then, of course, the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen, not to mention the Iran-backed Iraqi and Syrian Shia militias. But to have the possibility of ballistic missile fire or drones coming from Iranian territory, it changes the threat level and the alert for the Israeli people. Remember, when we break down Israel's missile defense system, they have these larger systems, the longer range systems, such as David's Sling and the Arrow 2 and 3 advanced missile defense systems. But they also have American Patriot batteries on the ground here in Israel and a THAAD missile defense system that likely will be used amid any sort of incoming Iranian missile attack. And as for any updates that we're receiving from the Israeli government, we have heard tonight from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as you mentioned earlier, and he confirmed that this was an attack not only meant to send a message to the Iranian regime, but truly meant to damage the Iranians' ability to develop a nuclear weapon. And again, the latest information that we have tonight from the IDF is that dozens of Israeli aircraft participated in these strikes, and they not only targeted nuclear facilities, but also many of the long-range missile capabilities that belong to the Iranian regime. We can figure that the Israelis knew that the Iranians were preparing to respond. They've been able to use satellites and intelligence capabilities to see the movement of Iranian missiles. And Israeli media talked about the possibility of a strike like the one that we saw tonight that not only went after the nuclear sites, but also targeted those long-range missiles, understanding that these are the very missiles that the Iranians used in April of last year and October of last year to target Israel. And so again, Sean, the latest information that we have tonight, we can confirm the Israelis have targeted Iranian nuclear facilities and the Iranian missile program. There are also reports on the ground in Tehran following loud explosions that took place in the capital city that individuals were targeted in these strikes. We do expect more waves of Israeli strikes to take place. But again, on the ground here in central Israel, the country is bracing for what is expected to be an Iranian response. That window for a response has gotten shorter and shorter during every round that has taken place. It was 12 days between the initial Israeli strike back in April of last year before the Iranians responded. The window was shorter in October, and Israeli officials have told us they believe the response window tonight will be even shorter. Sean?
All right, Trey Yanks in Israel tonight. Stay with us. We'll check back in with you in a little bit. Also, the great one, Mark Levin, will weigh in, and much more. We have a panel coming up. Now, Israeli military officials, they are reporting that Iran had enough fusion material to make 15 nuclear weapons within days. Anyway, joining us now from the Pentagon, our own Jennifer Griffin. Jennifer, what are you hearing there?
Well, Sean, it's very clear that the U.S. military would like to distance itself from these strikes inside Iran. We've heard from U.S. defense officials that the U.S. military was not involved. But we also are learning from Israeli security sources about what went down earlier today. I'm told that there was a cabinet meeting inside Israel and that the war cabinet believed that they were getting together to talk about a ceasefire in Gaza, a possible hostage deal. And then when they were brought into the room, they were many of them were asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, and they were told that they were really brought together because they were moving forward with the strikes against Iran's nuclear program. I'm told from well-placed sources that this will go on for days, and that some of those targets include not just the nuclear facilities, as well as the ballistic missile sites, but also individuals, and possibly there are indications, reports from the region that the Iranian general staff was targeted, suggesting that the chief of staff of the Iranian army may have been killed in the strikes, and that other Iranian nuclear scientists were also struck. If you look back to the way that Israel handled Hezbollah in the north with the exploding pagers, it is likely that they wanted to disrupt the ability of Iran's military, their general staff, those responsible for the ballistic missile program, to be able to respond. Israel is bracing itself right now, expecting that there will be some sort of response. But I think if you look at the past, Sean, it's quite clear that taking out that layer of creating chaos amongst those who would call for those ballistic missile strikes is something that Israel has done in the past and would likely have done this time. Again, right now there are reports of some explosions in and around Baghdad. The U.S. Has an embassy there, as well as military personnel based in Iraq. And of course, there are 40,000 American troops across the Middle East. They are at bases and in extremely vulnerable positions. The White House and the Pentagon have given a warning to the Iranians not to strike those bases, but they are prepared, and that is why you heard Secretary Hegseth order that ordered departure of military dependence just yesterday. Sean.
All right, Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon tonight. Thank you. In case you are just joining us tonight, massive breaking news from the Middle East. Israel now conducting, as we speak, a major airstrike against Iran at the heart of its nuclear program. But also they are going after their long-range missile sites. But now the world, especially Israel and American bases in the region, they are bracing for a potential Iranian response. There's a lot to get into. We're going to be joined in a minute by the great one. Well, there he is, Mark Levin. Mark, I want to give a little bit of a commentary into a question and then hand you the ball here, because I think this is very imperative to point out. The world needs to look at this from Israel's point of view. You know, October 7th was orchestrated in part by the Quds forces in Iran and by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards forces. Given a little history here. They are the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. Trey Yanks was talking about a 7-front war. You have Lebanon and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad in the north. You have Gaza. You have Hamas, the equivalent of 40,000 Americans murdered on October 7th. You had murder and rape and torture and kidnapping and beheadings. I've seen the videos. Then they're supplying weaponry to the Houthi rebels. Then the Iraqi and the Syrian militias, et cetera, and Iran firing missiles into this country on its own. They have threatened to wipe Israel off the map. If you look at Axios today, and my sources have confirmed this, that they have been building out these 2,000, pound ballistic missiles with warheads, and even building out and developing new ballistic missiles with a 4,000-pound warhead. There are reports, Axios, 2,000 to 3,000, maybe more. That, to me, represents Plan B. So if you put yourself in Israel's shoes tonight, they are being, all the terror against them, all the threats against them, the head of the snake in all of this, that would be the Iranian regime. They're the ones that have started this. They're the ones fomenting this. They're the ones responsible for all the death, all the destruction. I'll say one last thing. My prediction is Israel will be victorious, as difficult an operation as this will be. I believe Donald Trump, if they dare lift a finger against one American, God help them, he will unleash hell. I would put I'd put everything I had on that. And the Israelis do deserve our support, and they will have it at the right time, when needed, if necessary. But I will tell you, the world needs to ask itself a question, and I believe I know the answer. I just got back from the Gulf states. I got back from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar, and from the UAE. I talked to a lot of people, Mark. They want this regime out. They just don't have the courage to take them on because they fear Iranian hegemony in the region. I'll hand it to you. The Israelis had no choice from my perspective. What's yours?
The Iranians are about to get their asses kicked, and it's been coming since Jimmy Carter. They've slaughtered Americans. They've slaughtered Arabs. They've slaughtered their own people. They think this is Joe Biden's administration, that they would get away with getting nuclear weapons, and then the world would sit there, wouldn't know what to do about it. You talk about ballistic missiles. Israel sees thousands of ballistic missiles. It can't defend against 5,000, 10,000 ballistic missiles. And it's not going to sit there and take it. This Iranian regime is a terrorist Islamist regime. It is an illegitimate regime. It came to power through the point of a gun, and it expects to stay in power with nuclear weapons. Thank God we have Donald Trump as president of the United States. Thank God Israel has Benjamin Netanyahu as the prime minister. And I will say this. If this Islamic terrorist regime touches one hair on the head of an American citizen, they're going to wish they hadn't. And I want you to understand something, Sean. We have hundreds of thousands of American citizens in Israel. We have our experts telling us about our base and so forth. We have hundreds of thousands of American citizens in Israel right now. And so this is a big deal. And I would not ever bet against Israel. I would never bet against the United States of America. And the United States of America, I feel comfortable, I don't have inside information, is watching, is poised, and is prepared. And this Iranian regime, which thinks that Israel should just sit there and take it, even though they have mouthpieces in our own country that have given them aid and comfort, I want the Israeli people to know the overwhelming majority of the American people tonight are rooting for you. We hate this regime too. They've tried to kill the president of the United States. Now, this president, I think, has had enough. This attack, I cannot believe, no inside information would have gone on without us at least getting a wink and a nod. I want the Israeli people to know that. I want the American people to know that we stand on the side of a free people, of a democracy. This tiny little country is now fighting a war for their survival. They're fighting a war for the United States because these intercontinental missiles are meant for us. How do I know? Because the enemy has told us. They're fighting a war for Europe. Europe that keeps trying to destroy this little country through the UN and their own laws and so forth. This tiny little country is fighting a war for the free world against this Islamic Nazi regime that's backed by the communist Chinese, that's backed by the North Koreans, that's backed by the fascist Russian dictator Putin. And we should be supporting Israel every step of the way. I know in America we are. And I predict right now, they had zillions of chances, with President Trump, Steve Witkoff, they had zillions of chances to survive, this regime to survive. But they chose not to. You want to know why, America? Because they were always building nuclear weapons, despite what some of the propagandists in our country say. They always wanted them to threaten and destroy the state of Israel and to threaten and potentially destroy the United States. What are we supposed to do? What's Israel supposed to do? Wait till they have nuclear weapons to find out? Well, they're not going to. And these ballistic missiles you speak of, these leakers to Axios, which are just undermining our country, undermining Israel, undermining our president. But these leakers who talk about thousands of ballistic missiles, think about it, America. Let's say a nation in Central America had thousands of ballistic missiles, and they'd already shot some at us. You'd think we'd take kindly to that, and that same nation was within a hair's breadth of having nuclear weapons and building missiles specifically so they can reach us. Do you think we would put up with that for a second? Well, just because Israel is small, they're not going to do it. It's a nation of warriors. Look at this poor country. They've been at war for almost 2 years. They didn't pick a fight. Their people were slaughtered. Look at this poor country having to deal with Iran. We've dealt with these damnable bastards in Iran for half a century since Jimmy Carter let them in. They've killed our people. They've attacked our embassies. They've backed every terrorist attack against the United States of America. Israel wiped out the Hezbollah chieftains who killed American Marines. They did that. Israel wiped out Sinwar and the others who were pushing terrorism against America and funding what's going on our college campuses. Think about what this tiny little country is doing and is up against tonight. Those countries in Europe that are organizing against Israel and want to create a separate Palestinian state, shame on you. You are damnable. You are disgrace. You should be backing Israel. You should be supporting what they're doing. Just because you sold out your country, just because through immigration you've destroyed your country, doesn't mean Israel should roll over and play dead. The Jews in Israel, some of them survived the Holocaust. Many of them have family members who experienced it. They're not going to do it again. October 7th was the warning cry. Iran was behind it. Iran slaughtered those Jews. Iran did it. Iran slaughtered Americans. Iran did it. Now, Iran's finally, after half a century, going to get their asses kicked. That's my prediction.
Mark, by the way, this is what Israel is reporting. We can't independently confirm that the Chief of Staff, Commander of the Revolutionary Guard, the Secretary of Supreme Council, and others have been taken out, and one of their major nuclear facilities has taken a direct hit, none of which surprises me. I think the most important thing that you said is imagine if this was America. Imagine if we had a Hezbollah to the north, where Canada is, or if we had Hamas to the south, if we had Houthi rebels, if we had other terror groups or neighboring countries all firing missiles into our country. You know, I've been to Israel a number of times, as you know, and I've been in these underground terror tunnels that, you know, that money that should have been spent on hospitals and schools and helping the people in Gaza have better lives, but it wasn't used for that purpose. It was used for terror. I went to the border town, Sderot. You can see with the naked eye Gaza. That one town, when I went there at that time in the previous 10 years, had been hit with 10,000 rockets, and you could see the progression and the size and the lethalness of those rockets as they have evolved over the years, Mark. Kids could not play outdoors in the town of Sderot. They had to play in underground bunker playgrounds because it only took 12 to 13 seconds once a rocket was fired out of Gaza, often using civilians as shields from schools or hospitals. You had 13 seconds to get the kids out of the streets, so they had to play underground in a bunker. That has been their reality. If Americans had to live with that reality, I think they would have a very different perspective. But with all that said, Rasmussen poll, as you know, came out last week. 84% of Americans support Donald Trump ensuring that they don't have nuclear weapons. Looks like Israel has begun that operation tonight, and I do agree with your assessment that the U.S. will be there if needed. I do not believe, for those people that always say, well, this is going to be just like Iraq, it's going to be a long, protracted war. No. the nature of warfare has changed dramatically. I have been saying that the next generation of war will be fought in air-conditioned offices. It's not going to be door-to-door stepping over IEDs without up-armored Humvees like we went to in Iraq. That's not how it's going to happen. Mark, you get the last word. Go ahead.
Real quick, you know who's rooting for Israel? The Iranian people. The Iranian people have been slaughtered, butchered, and tortured. Nobody ever talks about the Persian people who want their liberty. You know who's rooting for Israel? The cowardice Arab countries, except for Qatar, perhaps. They keep their mouths shut and pray to God that the Israelis end this regime. That's the truth. The people in the dungeons and the prisons in Iran, they're rooting for the state of Israel as I speak right now. And we must be and should be too. They take this rash off of the body politic and their nuclear weapons with them. The United States, we can live in peace, at least sleep in peace, knowing that that Islamic, Nazi, terrorist regime no longer is a nuclear threat. And that is a big change for our military, for our geopolitical positions, and everything else. It's a big defeat for China, for North Korea, big defeat for Russia, maybe some of the other countries too. But this is an evil, evil regime. And the idea that there are some people who argue, let them have the nukes, we can manage it. What you see on your screen right now, America and Sean, ultimately, believe it or not, is peace. Because when they're done, and hopefully this regime loses its nuclear power and perhaps its head, based on what the Israelis are doing, this will be viewed as one of the greatest acts of preemption for peace in world history. That's what's going on.
It's not the first time, Mark. They did it with Iraq, they did it with Syria, and it now became a necessity for them tonight. And frankly, the world has to ask itself, will it be better off? And I did learn in the Gulf, on my trip to the Gulf states, that every one of those countries wants this country neutralized. They don't want a nuclear-armed Iran. All right, the great one, Mark Levin, thank you. We go back to Trey Yangst. He's in Israel. He has new information right now. Trey, what's going on?
Yeah, Sean, some context here to why this is happening today. Earlier this morning, there was a vote at the International Atomic Energy Agency, and for the first time in 20 years, they passed a resolution saying that Iran was not complying with their nuclear obligations. Iran immediately responded to that resolution, saying that they would start enriching uranium at a third nuclear site. And so it was very clear that going into this 6 rounds of talks this weekend between the Americans and the Iranians, that the playing field was already difficult for the Trump administration. President Trump spoke earlier today extensively about wanting diplomacy to prevail, but the military option was always on the table. Now the question is how the Iranians are going to respond. I remember back in 2020, President Trump ordered a drone strike to kill a top Iranian general called Qasem Soleimani outside of Baghdad's international airport. And it sent a message to the Iranians that the Americans were not afraid to target their top leadership if they were threatening American interests in the region. Now, the Israelis have done something similar tonight, targeting the nuclear sites and missile programs of the Iranian regime. Back then, when Qasem Soleimani was killed, the Iranians responded with 13 ballistic missiles targeting a base that housed American forces in western Iraq. That is very different from the types of Iranian responses we have seen in recent months. Last year in April, following an Israeli strike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria, that killed a top IRGC official, the Iranians responded 12 days later using 200 projectiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones. And then in October, following the Israeli targeting of the leadership from Hamas and also Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, when they responded, they used hundreds of ballistic missiles and partially overwhelmed Israeli air defense systems. And Sean, tonight, that is why Israel has not only closed the airspace, canceled flights to and from this country, but they're also telling people to stay close to bomb shelters. Israeli officials say this is not a question of if Iran responds, but rather when and how. They have canceled a parade that was supposed to take place here in Tel Aviv tomorrow. They have canceled school. They have canceled work. People are being told to stay close to bomb shelters at any minute. Sirens could begin to sound across this country, sending people for cover. And again, tonight we did hear from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who confirmed that the Natanz enrichment facility was targeted in these various strikes that included dozens of Israeli fighter jets. This is significant because when we get to the core of what we're talking about here, and Mark made a great point during his segment just a few minutes ago, we're talking about uranium enrichment. This is part of the material that is used to create a nuclear weapon. And the breakout time for the Iranian regime got shorter and shorter. And the Israelis continued to warn that ultimately they would be preparing and then ultimately take military action against the regime. And that's exactly what they have done tonight. Just to give you some context into what President Trump's calculation was in making a decision about supporting or not supporting the Israelis. The Trump administration has been very clear since taking office for a second time that Israel is a key ally of the United States. As for the possibility of diplomacy, President Trump wanted to emphasize that this is still possible, despite the fact that there could be a military option on the table. Sean?
I would argue that that option, and I got to give credit to the president, credit to Steve Witkoff. They've given them every opportunity. They were very clear that they had a choice here, and this is the decision they made. They are the #1 state sponsor of terror. They have been fomenting terror against Israel. How many tens of thousands of rockets can Israel continue to withstand from so many different sources? At this point tonight, we don't know the fallout. I would expect it's going to be fierce. I would also suspect that the Israelis, knowing Prime Minister Netanyahu for 30 years as I do, they will be prepared. The IDF is prepared to battle this war on all fronts if needed. And I'm sure the United States will, at the right time, engage if needed. Trey Yanks, thank you, in Israel tonight. Also, the IDF is mobilizing thousands of reservists after striking Iran's nuclear program in what is being described as, so far, a very successful strike. Joining us now, Senator Mark Wayne Mullins is with us. You know, one of the most fascinating things, we saw this back in April a year ago, Senator, and that was the ability of the Iranians to penetrate. This was after the first missile attack directly from Iran towards Israel. And they were able to take 98% of those missiles out of the air. The second time they tried ballistic missiles, they still got 95 or 6% of those missiles out of the air. But if you think back when Israel responded, it was shocking how deep they were able to penetrate into Iranian airspace. The entire air defense system, it seemed like they were able to penetrate it with great ease. So I've got to imagine that the Iranians have been working to beef up that system. Maybe 6 months from now, it would not be so easy to penetrate deep inside Iranian space. So I think that probably did factor into their decision to move now, but certainly the enrichment breakout time is key.
Well, Sean, keep in mind, Iran is simply defending, or not defending themselves. Iran right now is trying to be aggressive and fight wars through proxies, meaning that they use Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis to fight. They're not great fighters themselves. And what's happening here is Israel has systematically weakened each one of these terrorist groups. It's really interesting, too, because I guarantee you tomorrow what you're going to hear from Iran and from other anti-Israel countries, and probably even some of our media, is going to be, it's going to try accusing Israel as being aggressors, that they didn't, Iran didn't attack them directly, but we know for a fact that they're the #1 sponsor of war on terror. So what has happened here is over the last 6 months, Israel has taken out their fighting arms. At the same time, it's taken out their air defense. And when they left them vulnerable over the last attack by taking out their air defense, what has now happened is it's opened a door for them to go deeper in, take out their nuclear sites, and take out their leaders. What Iran should have done is paid attention to this. Now, I don't think Israel was working directly with the United States on this. However, I do believe that we knew something was happening because we saw the order that was given just 36 hours ago about getting dependents out of the area, and even went farther and saying non-essential individuals that are U.S. citizens should probably be leaving the area, because we knew something was happening. Even though President Trump made it very clear today when I was visiting with him, he made it very clear last week, Marco Rubio's made it very clear that we would want diplomacy, if it's possible, to be able to work with Iran. However, the difference between this president, President Trump, and President Biden is President Trump believed in making that diplomacy strengthened by peace through strength, where Biden wanted peace through appeasement. And we're in this mess because of that foreign policy by Biden. So I fully support everything that Israel is doing here. I fully support them taking out Iran in any manner possible. However, I'm very impressed by the way they've done this systematically by taking out their terrorist organizations first.
All right, Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, Oklahoma, we appreciate you being with us tonight. We go to Peter Doocy. He's standing by at the White House tonight. Peter, clearly through Secretary of State Marco Rubio's statement, the White House saying they are not part of tonight's military action. However, we do know that the president has been a steadfast, strong supporter, ally of Israel, and has stated many times he will continue to be.
Sean, earlier today, I had a chance to talk to President Trump in the East Room about this, and I asked him basically, are you trying to talk Benjamin Netanyahu out of strikes on Iran, or do you want to keep a nuclear weapon out of the Iranians' hands so bad that you would just say, it's not our war, and let him do his thing? And President Trump's answer was a little bit longer than what I'm going to Cliff's note it as, but he said Iran just cannot be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. I'm just off the phone with some senior staff. President Trump, I'm told, is in the West Wing talking to his senior staff, and he is watching the news from the region about what is going on. And it's kind of an interesting place to be right now, the White House, because when most of the folks were leaving here around 6 o'clock after the nightly newscasts, there was a congressional picnic that was starting on the lawn. As I was walking back in through the gates, Pennsylvania Avenue is now completely closed. There are Secret Service patrolling. They're keeping people pretty far back, which is something that they do when there are big international incidents. There are heightened tensions. They just want to make sure that they have this area secure. But there are some guests from the congressional picnic still leaving as President Trump is in the West Wing trying to figure out what exactly is going on. He told me earlier today that Israel did not tell them anything specifically that led to the evacuation of American dependents, American military family dependents in the Middle East. But we know that they had some kind of a tip, whether or not the Israelis told us directly or our own intelligence in the region tipped us off. They didn't do that for no reason, because it was a huge operation that a lot of people thought was going to go for a couple more days. But it really only went about 24, 36 hours. Something else, just being here every... Well, yes.
Iranian state media now has confirmed what we reported earlier that we weren't able to confirm, that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard chief has been killed in a strike. It shows you the depth of the intelligence that the Israelis have. Pretty amazing. But you're saying that the president is in the White House, is watching this unfold live tonight, correct?
Yes, and as I was walking up the driveway, I don't have a clear view right now, but there was still a Marine as of about 5 minutes ago, a Marine sentry posted outside the West Wing gates, which means that the president is either at the Oval Office desk or in the Situation Room with his team there. And just something that I would say about the first 140 days or so being here with Trump for his second term, he's been very, very focused on keeping America out of new wars. And when you talk to him about Ukraine, you talk to him about Gaza, he emphasizes that is not America's war. He wants to work hard to try to end them, but it is not America's war. And so I would
listen, Peter. He's done everything humanly possible, along with Steve Witkoff, to give an off-ramp to the Iranians. They chose not to take it, and they got very arrogant about it. And this is the inevitable result. You don't get to be the #1 state sponsor of terror and provide all the weaponry to be fired into Israel and then not expect Israel to take your words seriously that you want to wipe them off the map. Peter Doocy at the White House tonight. Thank you. Joining us now, Israeli Special Ops veteran Aaron Cohn and Congressman Brian Mast. Thank you both for being with us. Aaron, what are you seeing tonight? It looks like a full-on assault, and it looks like they're going for everything, not only their nuclear sites, but also their long-range missile sites. The story that emerged out of Axios today, as confirmed by my sources, was basically laying out a scenario that was their plan B to overwhelm the Iron Dome. That has been taken care of also tonight, or is being taken care of.
Yeah, Sean, so this Israel striking means that they didn't have a choice. This means that this was an intelligence-driven operation. It likely means that Iran was probably weeks away from going nuclear. And that's the reason why Israel went in as hard as they did and when they did. And so Iran is likely at the point where they're enriching uranium somewhere close to that 85%. And there's hiding sites, stalling negotiations with the president. They backed out of that, and building a launch-ready missile arsenal. That means that if Israel waits, it wouldn't be off. It wouldn't be off the table. Iran would have used these weapons against Israel. So they struck first because that's what we have to do. And the Israeli Air Force, likely multiple phase offensive, Sean, the F-35s, targets were likely Natanz, the Fordow, and then those are Iran's core enrichment facilities, and then likely hit Isfahan, which is where that uranium gets processed. They would probably also have taken out Shahab and the Khebar missile platforms, and those are the long-range systems that are aimed or were aimed right at that moment at Tel Aviv and beyond. And in Tehran, the IRGC command that you just reported, right inside the capital, Israel's going to always go after that leadership and start trimming those nails and getting heads off those snakes. So, you know, this was a kill chain. That's what we'd call this. A kill chain through and through, preemptive. And it's not over. And the IDF obviously confirming that this is probably going to go on for a few more days. But Israel's doing what it has to do, trying to delay threats that are trying to eliminate us. And that's what you just saw play out here.
Brian Mast, also we welcome to the program. Mark Meadows is also with us. Brian, we'll go to you first. Get your take on what is unfolding tonight. I don't think Israel had an option. How many more tens of thousands of missiles are you going to allow the Iranians, either directly or through their proxies, to fire into that country?
Yeah, I think you asked the right question, but the way that we need to be asking that is this. Everybody asking, what's the response going to be by Iran? Well, you know what it's not going to be? It's not going to be a nuclear weapon. It's not going to be uranium. It's not going to be measured in kilotons and megatons. If there's a response, it's going to be high explosives measured in a couple thousand pounds. That's the big difference. That's why we need to be thanking Israel right now, because by doing this, they're saying we need to change the ballgame. We can't let Iran get to the place that they start operating the way that Russia and Putin operate, saying anytime that they want to, we're going to respond with a nuclear weapon. If we see this as a threat of war, we mean a nuclear act of war. We can't let Iran get to that point. And thank you, Israel, for making sure that they're not going to have a nuclear response.
The commander, Mark Meadows, of the Revolutionary Guards has been killed in this strike, once again showing superior intelligence of the Israelis, just like the pager incident, is beyond superior. They have had to brace themselves for this inevitable moment, and getting close to weapons-grade enrichment is a risk they could not take from a country that has been firing tens of thousands of rockets at them.
Well, it's a risk that they couldn't take, but it's a risk that we couldn't take either, Sean. You know, one of the interesting things, there's going to be all kinds of armchair quarterbacks out there saying, well, you should have negotiated longer. Let me just tell you, as someone who has followed this particular issue for well over a decade, I can tell you that the Iranians are not honorable negotiators. And the only thing worse than a dishonorable negotiator is one with a nuclear weapon. And so they had every right to do it. They should do it. Obviously, in the Situation Room, you know, Peter Doocy's there reporting from the White House. There are certainly a number of the president's team in the Situation Room right now looking at what is happening in real time. I can tell you, he's got the best team there around him. But the patience that President Trump has shown in dealing with Iran really has brought us to this night, because we couldn't have waited any longer. We are weeks away from a nuclear Iran, which means that it would wreak havoc not only for Israel, but for America as well.
And the Supreme Leader, Aaron, was getting very, very arrogant in his comments by rejecting the president's offer. We've got 20 seconds. We'll let you comment on that.
Bihoshtar mizanet, dagi gavi bihiram, which means we'll hit you without warning, precise, strong, ruthless. Sean, Israel doesn't have any choice. The longer they wait, the closer Israel. It's about survival for Israel, so we struck first. And let that be a lesson to all the leaders of the IRGC. Israel's got assets everywhere. We're watching. And you did this to your country and flipped them all for us. So thank you.
All right, Aaron, thank you. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left this evening. Our prayers are with the people of Israel. Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Can't. Stay with the Fox News channel all night. Continuing breaking news, live coverage, the Israeli strikes against Iran. Trace Gallagher will take it here. Let not your heart be troubled. And please set your DVR so you never, ever, ever miss an episode of Hannity. Godspeed, Israel. Trace takes it from here. Thanks for being with us.
And good evening. I'm Trace Gallagher. It's 10 p.m. on the East Coast, 7 o'clock here in Los Angeles, and 5 a.m. in Israel, a country now bracing for a robust response from Iran. Welcome to a special edition of America's Late News, Fox News at Night. And breaking tonight, Israel launching preemptive strikes against Iran, striking Iranian territory and targeting Iranian nuclear sites, as well as Iran's long-range missile capabilities and military command centers. Now, we are told the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, military strikes in Iran will continue for most, if not the better part of all night. Israel is now calling the mission, quoting here, Operation Rising Lion. And Israel decided to act now because the country believes that Iran is close to having, or does have, as many as 15 nuclear warheads. This has been a concern going on now for decades. And while Israel is targeting Iran, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu believes that Iran will soon target Israel. And therefore, the country tonight is on, or this early morning, is on high alert. Let's bring in the chief foreign correspondent, Trey Yingst. He's live in Tel Aviv on what is now early Friday morning, almost 5 a.m. Friday morning, or now just past 5 a.m. Friday morning. Trey, what are we learning? What are you seeing?
Yeah, Trace, good evening. A state of emergency has been declared across Israel, civilians being told to stay next to bomb shelters after the Israeli military tonight launched strikes against Iranian nuclear sites, the country's missile program, and also targeted specific individuals. According to Iranian state media, Hossein Salami, the entire head of the IRGC, was killed in an Israeli strike. Other casualties are being reported.